I'm Gloria Cheung, and my vice chairs are Trent and Sabina. This year we will be in the Nato committee, so that's the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And our two topics are stability, post-intervention stability in Libya, as well as the unrest in the Baltic region. So I picked NATO because NATO is obviously one of the largest military alliance organizations in the world. It controls over 70% of military spending in the world. And more importantly, as an organization, it's bound by very, very little rules. In fact, it has a Clause 5 ruling that allows its member states to invoke kind of a military alliance to protect one of the member states if they get invaded, which I think is a really, really interesting dynamic for a delegate who wants to understand how regional organizations and powers work outside of the UN when they don't have to work under the auspices of like resolutions and kind of like coordination, and it's more kind of fast reacting to what's happening on the ground. And I think NATO is a perfect example of one of these few organizations, and I really want to like bring the experience to delegates to kind of learn more about it. So I'm a Middle Eastern Studies major, and so throughout the last 10 years, we've been learning about like the invasions in Afghanistan and like recently in Libya, and there's always this constant kind of rhetoric about whether we've done enough to kind of ameliorate the effects of the intervention. And I think in the case of Libya, which is one that NATO has had a strong kind of linkage with, they pulled out so suddenly that there wasn't really a discussion on what happens after that. And we see that Libya is right now under complete anarchy and chaos. It's actually astounding how bad it is. And I think it's really, really important at this point in time to rediscuss this in light of the American experience of Afghanistan. And I think seeing that so many people from Bmun come to Bmun from America as well as from other countries, I think it's more important now than any other time to talk to the younger generation about what it really means to intervene in a country and take responsibility for the repercussions for that. And I think this is just one of the many examples which we can explore the topic. Well, the second topic on the unrest in the Baltic region and the Black Sea, it's actually a really underdeveloped topic in a sense that very little very little media or kind of attention has been put to it. And I think like when you talk to like professors and academics, they're the only people who are really interested in what's happening right now, despite the fact that this is a region that's completely filled with like weapons and filled with like ships and filled with like military exercises. It's one of the biggest military exercises in the world, and we don't see that in the news. And I think it's really, really important to look at that from kind of like an internal level and kind of see why are we not talking about this issue, number one, and number two, what can we really do to stop basically World War III? Because if you know anything about Russia and the US, then you would think that this is a basically very critical topic. Yeah, so because it's a military topic, clearly one of the things I would really, really love to do this year is to create a situation for war games. And war games are a simulation done usually between people of a bilateral or multilateral alliance where they kind of simulate like a war or a crisis. And I think because Russia won't be in the committee, I think it'd be really, really interesting to get the committee to break off for an hour and kind of like simulate what it would look like if Russia invaded one of the countries there and kind of how they would respond and kind of talk about what these responses really mean in the real world. Like, what does it mean when you like invade Russia, right? Or like Ukraine, and what does it mean when you kind of don't do that and you create a barrier to resistance instead? So this is one of the few things that we've never ever done in Bmun before. So I really, really want to do it for the committee, and I think it'd be super, super exciting to do that. Yeah, so my main key advice would be that despite the fact that it looks really boring to do this usually, I would advise delegates to look at the rhetoric of representatives of both NATO and Russia. And I think the reason for this is that usually government rhetoric tends to be very bland and very censored and very kind of like it beats around the bush a lot. In this very, very specific case for the second topic, the rhetoric has been very, very strong from both NATO and Russia. They've been very explicit about like viewing this as a next war, and the words that they use have been very strong and very, very forceful in the sense that it kind of manifests in physical action. So I think looking at a rhetoric will give us a very, very good idea on what's going to happen in next year. And so I highly encourage delegates to do that just because it's one of the few times government officials are really honest about how they feel. I am really, really, really extremely excited for Bmun 65. It will be my last conference, and I hope that will be my best conference.